Do you ever find yourself consistently getting jumped by opponents out of nowhere? Do your opponents keep miraculously killing you faster than you can kill them? Or do you feel like you're always in the wrong place at the wrong time? Well, one of the main reasons for all of these problems is that your team's recon player sucks. A single good recon player can make sure that your team avoids all of these issues, along with helping to keep those pesky vehicles back in the spawn screen where they belong. Today, I'm going to teach you everything I know about mastering this class. By the end of the video, you'll know exactly which gadgets to use in every situation, along with some of the lesser known tips on how to get the most out of them. You'll be on track to master both sniping and close quarters recon playstyles, and you'll be making a massive impact in every game. There's a reason the typical recon player gets a bad stereotype. You might be thinking of the player who just sets up in the back of the map, glues their face to a sniper scope, and proceeds to miss all of their shots. Well, first thing in this video, I want you to delete that idea from your mind.
Empty my mind.
This is not how good recon is played. It may be scary to leave your little sniper perch, but one of the most important tips for all recon players is to just get in the fight. Yes, even if you're sniping, don't just sit back there and camp. I'm not saying you have to be on the absolute front lines, but if you're at least involved in the fight, you're more available to help your teammates not only by getting kills on opponents, but also by providing critical information to your squad. And don't worry, you don't have to be the sharpest shooter on the team to be a great recon player. The most important thing to do well in Battlefield 6 with any class, including recon, is having a solid game plan. If you keep this in mind, you're already a step ahead of everyone else. Let me show you an example, because I really do believe that understanding the plan is a big part of the way to becoming a good recon player. And in this case, it's what enabled me to go on a pretty long kill streak in a hot contested area. The players here were not killed by random chance. The reality is I just did my job as a recon player properly. I used my recon kit to get a detailed overview of the situation. Pay close attention to the minimap. Based on the info I just gathered from dropping a motion sensor into a great spot, I could use my suppressed weapon to stealthily eliminate the players before they could correctly assess the situation. They had no idea that my motion sensor was tracking them, and in the end, I got a big multi-kill here. I have a whole bunch more clips just like it thanks to having the right game plan and executing it properly. From the point of view of the enemy, it probably looked like I just jumped on them out of nowhere. They were caught completely off guard and fed me kills one by one, eventually allowing my team to hold an important nearby objective. This is the decisive advantage of a recon player. Not just for yourself, but for the benefit of your entire team. And that's what makes them so powerful in Battlefield 6. So remember this, your main job is to use the information available to you through your kit to get the best possible awareness of the situation. At every point in time, I want you thinking, what can I learn about my enemies and how can I use that information to my advantage? The better you get at collecting information, correctly interpreting it, and then relaying it to your team, the less your team will have to second guess their plays and the safer and more consistent you will be in your engagements. And hey, don't take it from me, the ancient military general Sun Tzu wrote about it over 2,000 years ago in his Art of War. What enables the good general to strike and conquer and achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men is foreknowledge, or those little red diamonds. So now you know what you want to do, and for the rest of the video, I'm going to help you understand every single possibility of how you can gather as much information as possible and use it to help your team win the game. Let's talk about your kit as a recon player. We need to decide what to use in every situation and the best way to use what we have available. So every recon player has a motion sensor by default. I use the motion sensor in the gameplay clip that you just saw, and with that one, the most important thing is to put it in a location which is both safe but also close to a lot of players who move frequently past it. One thing which I see so many experienced players forget when playing recon is that their teammates are also a huge source of information. I don't just mean in the pinging sense, but literally the locations of the blue dots on your minimap can tell you a lot about the situation in the game. So if you see a bunch of teammates just moving around freely, you're probably in a location where there aren't too many other enemies. So it's probably not worth wasting your motion sensor here. If your teammates are jiggling around and mostly stationary in a fixed position or on an objective, they're probably having a standoff with a large number of opponents. One way to drop this gadget is to drop your motion sensor right in the primary line of fire. You might get some pings here and inflate your score a little bit. But how much is that really helping your team? I mean, your teammates are already looking that way anyway. Instead, what if we use it a bit more strategically to gain intel on where opponents might be flanking us? So for example, if I'm already on an objective with several teammates, I'm going to place it in the area where opponents are most likely to sneak up on the zone. If you see a possible flanking route, that too would be a perfect location to place the sensor. But if you're alone or close to an objective all by yourself, and you don't already have teammates covering certain angles, then the motion sensor can help you stay aware of opponents who are trying to approach you by placing it in a more centrally located area around your current position. Also, note that players who are stationary or moving slowly enough by either crouch walking or prone crawling won't get picked up by the motion sensor. So these are a bit less helpful in those sneaky crouching standoffs. But in my experience so far in Battlefield 6, most players just run around all guns blazing, so that isn't really a big downside. The sensor detects motion from approximately 15 meters away, but it does have a tiny delay before it picks up the player. 15 meters is not much, but most corridors on maps are just a few meters across, so a motion sensor placed in a building will comfortably catch pretty much all of the incoming players. You need to know your map really well, and you're going to need to position yourself accordingly to get the most out of the sensor. So that was just one of our gadgets, and actually a gadget that every Recon has access to by default. There are a few other ways that you could safely tag players and even make some really sneaky plays that you might not have known about. For example, you can use the Recon drone and actually get quite a few funny moments with it. In its basic functionality, the drone can fly high over your team and spot everyone in a gunfight. And it's probably the most reliable and safest way of clearing an area and letting your team know everything about an enemy's whereabouts. Having this aerial view of the map is amazingly powerful, and you can quickly spot nearly every enemy on the opposing team in just a matter of seconds. One of the more fun things you could and arguably should be doing is engaging in space warfare against the enemy drones, because you can actually disable them if you find them first. Doing this feels like a whole different minigame inside of Battlefield. Plus, it denies the enemy team from collecting all that info about your teammates' locations. So for me, taking out an enemy drone with my own is priority number one. What you can also do, and this is really funny to me, is blow up your opponent's gadgets in their face. So if you find a pesky mortar player, you can Uno reverse that bomb right back at them. Or you can use the enemy's anti-tank mines or Claymores against them too. If you're lucky, you can even kill the enemy's tanks by doing the same thing. A single good Recon drone pilot can make a huge impact on the game with plays like this. Another very easy way to get a lot of enemies spotted, which a lot of players don't even know about, is the UAV. Did you know that in Battlefield 6, you actually have a class ultimate ability now? It's hidden all the way over on the right hand side of the UI and requires a special button press to activate it once you've earned it. On mouse and keyboard, the default is the number 6 key, and on controller, it's left and right bumpers together. Regardless of which training path you pick for Recon, and we'll talk about this choice more later in the video, your ultimate ability is the same. This UAV completely reveals everyone in a 100 meter radius around you for 60 seconds after you activate it. 100 meters is huge in the game. That's basically wall hacks for your entire team. It's a really powerful ability, and I see loads of players, even experienced ones, completely forgetting to use it. Frankly, it's easy to forget with it being tucked all the way over in the corner of your screen when you're in the middle of a big fight, but try to remember to pop these things when you're in a good position and your teammates will really appreciate it. One of the major elements to becoming a great Recon player is understanding exactly which gadgets are most appropriate for whichever situations. As I go through the remaining gadgets, I want you to pay attention to my explanations of when you should use them over the alternatives. The laser designator is such a cool and tricky gadget. I bet you've missed out on some pretty epic ways you can be using this thing. I'll try my best to show you everything I figured out about it, but if you have any other ideas on how to use this awesome gadget, please let me know in the comments. First, the laser designator comes with a thermal scope which can be switched on and off. This works on both infantry and vehicles, and it can be really quick to pull out and easily spot enemies who are hiding in plain sight. It has 4 levels of zoom, which means that it can be great for finding snipers all the way hiding hundreds of meters away on a mountaintop. By the way, I like to rebind my zoom key to the mouse wheel down so I can quickly toggle between these zoom levels on the fly. I'll go over what painting a vehicle does exactly in a second, but first, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the turret mode of the binoculars. In Battlefield 6, you can actually place down your laser designator on the ground and leave it there just to remotely connect to it later whenever you want. The turret will autonomously spot anyone who passes by, essentially giving you an extra pair of eyes whenever you set it down. Do note though, it takes on the orientation of the surface you place it on, so if you're trying to set it up on top of some mountain peak, it can be leveled out in really funky ways. Luckily though, you can always just pick it up and move it around. There are so many creative playmaking possibilities with the turret mode of the laser designator. First of all, the huge red glint from the laser is no longer directly on your forehead, so anyone who'd want to shoot back is not shooting directly at you. Second, it's the easiest way to safely figure out where enemy snipers are hiding. If you're being bombarded by sniper shots and you're scared that you're going to get blasted the second you peek out from a corner, you can just let the turret mode do the peeking for you. With that info, you can then plan your route accordingly, or if you're like me, just pre-aim a perfectly placed headshot right back at that pesky camper since you know exactly where they're hiding. As I said, the point of Recon is to get boatloads of information safely, and I can safely say the laser designator 100% fulfills that role. And now, the Picasso part of the laser designator, the painting. You might not believe me when I say it, but painting is essentially a death sentence for a vehicle. By painting a vehicle, it allows engineers and certain vehicle weapon systems to lock onto a target much faster. And in some cases, it allows weapons to lock onto targets that are otherwise impossible to damage. For example, the engineer's anti-air missile normally can't damage a tank, but if you laser paint the tank, it can then lock on and do some great damage. It makes this great tool from the engineer even more useful on maps with a mix of both air and land vehicles. If you've been annoyed by helicopters or excessive tanks in your matches, most likely the issue is that you don't have a Recon player who is consistently painting them. Even paired with just a single engineer, you can basically keep the skies clear of any threats for your team. The laser painter is of course a little bit less effective in modes without vehicles. While sure, it can safely ping sniper players and it can help you out with that second pair of eyes whenever you deploy it, the drone kinda does its job a little bit better and more flexibly. So I would recommend picking the designator whenever there's a big vehicle problem in your match and nobody else is painting the targets for your engineers. It's especially good on those big open maps with really long sightlines. But if that's not the case, luckily we have another gadget that arguably performs the same task even better. The tracer dart is one of my favorite ways to play Recon on maps with a lot of vehicles. You can simply take it out and shoot it at any nearby vehicles up to a pretty long range. It's a bit tricky to hit a chopper or especially a jet, but if the ground's contested with a lot of land vehicles, the tracer dart is amazing. The big advantage over the laser designator is that you can pop out from cover, shoot an enemy vehicle with the dart, and then safely dip right back into cover and return to your normal fighting activities. I found the dart to be a far superior option when fighting more close quarter battles on maps where the designator just doesn't make much sense to use because the vehicles can easily break line of sight. The darts do experience a little bit of bullet drop, so you may need to aim high on the target that's really far away to get a hit. To me, the choice of a laser designator or a tracer dart mostly comes down to the situation and figuring out if the bigger threat is more the ground vehicles like the tanks and IFVs, or more coming from the air with jets and helicopters. The sniper decoy may seem like the biggest meme of the bunch, and in some ways I think you'd be right about that, but they can also be really fun to use and surprisingly effective, especially giving you a big edge in straight up 1v1 sniper duels. One important thing to note about the sniper decoy is that it will mimic the position that you're in when you place it. So if you're prone, it will look like a prone sniper. If you're crouching, it will look like a crouching sniper, and if you're standing, it will look like a sniper who's still standing up. Probably the best part of this gadget though is that it'll actually hide your own sniper glint and instead show the sniper glint on the dummy. Once it gets destroyed though, your sniper glint will come right back to you, so you gotta be careful. It also spots itself and marks its position on the minimap so that enemies will know to look out for the decoy thinking it's a real player. This gives a chance for the enemy to shoot at your sniper decoy while you then strafe into the lane and counter snipe the enemy who's sniping at you and targeting your teammates. I've had a lot of fun placing these around the map, baiting out a sniper shot, then peeking back into the lane and getting an easy kill. Again, it's not the most useful gadget in the whole world, but they are pretty fun. I've found that this gadget is the most effective on modes like Breakthrough. You can use these as a great way to get an edge on an enemy sniper who's causing trouble for your team. Let's talk about some of the more explosive gadget choices for our Recon player. The Claymore is maybe the most stable gadget of any Recon class in the history of Battlefield. It's a directional mine which will detonate towards the cone shown by the lasers pointing from it. This will trigger on any enemies who are moving at a normal speed in the detection area, but it will not trigger against enemies who are either crouch walking or prone crawling through the area. So if you do see an enemy Claymore, you may have a chance to crouch walk or prone crawl by it without setting it off and giving away your position. In my experience so far, these things are a little bit hit and miss. If you place them in the right spots, they can be incredibly helpful for getting some free kills and maybe even more importantly, alerting you of enemies who are trying to get into a particular position to flank you. However, they often leave people just barely injured and don't secure the kill. Probably the most classic way to use these things is on top of a ladder to prevent someone from flanking you on a building, but they're also great on stairs or just around corners. The key for placement is to be sure that enemies are running around a corner and can't see the tripwire lines until it's too late. To me, these are a slightly more selfish gadget compared to some of the others, but if you have a really great spot for sniping or your squad's taking up an objective area and you just want to protect that particular entry point, they can be really helpful to prevent you from getting flanked. In my opinion, probably the most important gadget to unlock early on as a Recon player is C4. You can unlock it simply by completing the Recon 1 challenge, and it's really worth getting as soon as possible. C4 transforms you as a recon player from being somewhat defenseless against vehicles and relying on engineers to save you, to having an instant win button against them. Just throw a few C4 onto a tank, click that detonate button, and you've just eliminated one of the biggest threats on the battlefield against your team. They can also be used to blow up walls to gain an alternate entry point, or you can take down entire buildings and crush anyone who's inside. Or if you're short on options, you can even just chuck them over a small wall and basically use them as an extra grenade. Fun fact, by the way, you can also detonate C4 remotely with the throwing knife, which is maybe not all that helpful, but it's just kind of funny. There's also a fun little synergy where you can throw C4 onto the Recon drone and then fly the Recon drone around like a UCAV from Battlefield 4. Do note though that this will drastically reduce the battery charge on the Recon drone and therefore reduces your flight time. So this only really works for extremely close fights for the drone. They can also be placed onto vehicles where you can jump out and then instantly detonate them to take out bigger threats like a tank that would otherwise see you coming. As a Recon player, you also have your choice of 3 different throwables. The default is a frag grenade, which works just like the other classes. The proximity detector works just like the motion sensor, except it can be thrown. The radius is much smaller though, and it only lasts for a few seconds after landing. But if you want to place a motion sensor in an area that's too dangerous to traverse, it can be a really great option. These are extremely effective on modes like Breakthrough, where there's a lot of area to cover, especially if you're not able to get a traditional motion sensor deployed in a higher traffic area. The throwing knives are honestly a little bit of a disappointment. They can be fun to use, but they're definitely not as powerful as those from Battlefield 2042. They only provide a guaranteed one-shot kill on headshot, so if you're able to hit the head, you'll be rewarded, and the range you can do this from is pretty significant, but a body shot will not be an outright kill unless they're already somewhat injured. However, a body shot with a knife does delay their health regeneration for 10 seconds on non-lethal hits, which is an extremely long time and allows for an easy cleanup either by you or a teammate. I think if you can get really good at hitting headshots with these, they can be pretty effective, but in reality, it's more of just a fun gadget and maybe not the most useful one for your overall team. So now that you know everything about the gadgets at your disposal, it's time to talk about the most important part of your kit, your weapon of choice. In my opinion, you've got some equally valid options here, and it really depends on the training path that you want to play. If you're playing the sniper path, then you're obviously going to want to pick a sniper rifle. Personally, I prefer to play Recon like this most of the time since I absolutely love sniping in Battlefield games, and I have a ton of tips on how to improve your sniper gameplay that I'll share in a moment, including some tips on how to complete those challenges. Even if you don't like sniping though, or you want to play more of a CQB style of gameplay, there's a very exciting way to play Recon with the Spec Ops training path. You can unlock this option by completing the Recon 2 challenge, and my sniping tips will really help you out there. The Spec Ops path buffs your stealth in a few pretty interesting ways. By the way, regardless of which class you're playing, you don't have to do anything special to unlock these training path perks in the game. You just need to play and earn some points with your squad, and you'll automatically earn each of these perks one by one. You can see them pop up in game on the UI on the right side of your screen, and they'll light up in green as you unlock each of the 4 perks. These are all passive buffs except for the final one, which is an active ability, and you do need to press a key or a button to activate it. The low profile perk helps you get out of that in combat state a second and a half faster and also reduces your spotting status by 33%. This is a huge benefit for squad play because in those tense situations, it can be really tough to spawn on a squad mate who's constantly in combat. Those extra seconds can make a massive difference for capturing a point or supporting your squad mate in a situation where there's no other nearby spawn points. All you have to do is go prone to trigger this effect, and your squad mates will be really happy to have that faster respawn point. As long as you're not sprinting, you'll also get the Gadget Awareness perk, which allows you to spot nearby enemy gadgets and mark their position both in-game and on the minimap. This can be incredibly helpful for quickly finding enemy gadgets like Claymores, deploy beacons, or motion sensors that can really mess up your team's progress in capturing an objective. If you're looking to play the more spy-like style, the Stealth Tactics perk can really help you stay concealed. You're likely already going to be using a suppressed weapon to prevent you from showing up in the game world and on the minimap when you're firing. And the Stealth Tactics perk greatly reduces the sounds you're making when you're moving around while crouched or prone. Here's an example of what it sounds like in-game for both the normal sounds and the Stealth Tactics sounds. I don't know about you, but going for stealthy knife takedowns is one of my favorite things to do in the game, and this perk makes it even easier to do. With this Spec Ops playstyle, I think 2 weapon classes start to make a lot of sense. The carbines are in my experience generally better than assault rifles and play really well at medium to closer ranges. There's a good reason that the M4A1 became a top meta pick during the beta and is very popular early in the BF6 lifecycle. These carbines can be tap fired to get some kills from really long ranges, but can still do really good up close too. but especially on the really closer range maps, don't be sleeping on SMGs. Although it's the engineer who gets the SMG proficiency, these things work extremely well on Recon too. If you're playing the Spec Ops tree, you're likely going to be in close quarter fights a lot more anyways, and these SMGs just shred. They can also hold their own pretty well at medium ranges while tap firing too. I've found that the SCW-10 and the KV-9 Vector are two of the best guns in the entire game, and they play extremely well in Recon if you're wanting to be a bit more aggressive. Just be sure to slap a suppressor and an extended mag on either option and you're going to be doing great. I also mentioned that UAV class ultimate perk earlier, but be sure to be utilizing this as often as possible, especially when you're playing on the Spec Ops tree, because you're going to naturally be so much closer to the front lines and be in a better spot to drop that UAV. The default training path of the sniper has a ton of synergies with the passive benefits that we automatically get from playing the Recon class. One of these perks is the sniper rifle proficiency. Beyond this though, you also get inherently reduced weapon sway and also an improved ability to hold your breath while you're aiming to steady your scope. As a Recon player, we also have an incredibly powerful perk called Aim Spot, which lets us automatically spot enemies just by aiming down sights and looking at them. This marks them both in the in-game 3D world as well as on the minimap for all of your team members. This ability alone, combined with the benefit from the sniper training path we'll talk about in a second, makes a Recon player incredibly valuable for your team, even if you never hit a shot. Intel is a huge part of effective gameplay in Battlefield, and knowing where these enemy players are can be a major benefit to your team, as we've discussed in some of the gadget choices. It's worth noting here that although the other classes have a similar auto spot mechanic, that only spots the enemy for themselves and not for the whole team. You can tell the difference on screen here between an enemy who has the filled in diamond indicator from a Recon player versus the hollow diamond indicator from a non-Recon player. The filled in one means that your whole team can see that spot, whereas the hollow one is only visible to the player who did the auto spot. Since the Recon auto spots are visible to the entire team, it makes them so much more useful. One of the biggest problems of being a sniper player in any Battlefield game has historically been that you can get a kill, but then have the enemy get an easy revive, which completely negates the effect you had on the fight. This means that you could be a slight annoyance to the other team, but you're really not having much of an impact in the game. However, with the new confirmed kill perk, a good sniper can literally delete tickets single-handedly from the other team just by landing a fatal headshot, which means that that player can't be rezzed. This is incredibly powerful in modes like Breakthrough, where respawn tickets are really scarce and an important part of the gameplay. It also synergizes as a Recon player in so many different ways. If you develop your skill to become a really strong sniper, you can have an enormous impact on every round if you're able to land some headshots. But even if you aren't a crack shot with the sniper quite yet, you can still be really beneficial to the team with the other two perks. Target Acquired will spot enemies simply by inflicting damage onto them, so even if you're just hitting non-lethal body shots, you'll still be spotting them for your team both in the game world and on the minimap for some easy cleanup kills. But what if you can't hit much of anything at all? Well, as promised, I'll give you some tips really soon about improving your aim and performance with the snipers, but rest assured with the Enhanced Perception perk, even without firing a single bullet, you'll at least be spotting enemies at further distances and from a wider angle from the center of your crosshair automatically, and these spots will last 3 seconds longer than usual. This is a really massive benefit to your team, especially because suppressors and flash hiders are so prevalent in the meta right now. By being a Recon player who's at least aiming and seeing these enemies, you're giving your team some incredibly valuable intel about where the enemies might be on the map and allowing them to get kills that they otherwise may have missed. Now, I can't go making a Recon guide without extensively talking about getting better at sniping, which is probably my favorite thing to do in any Battlefield game. On one hand, it's a fun way to rack up a lot of kills quickly, but I think it goes a lot further beyond that. Getting really good at sniping can quickly help eliminate counter-sniper threats that make entire parts of the map safe for your team to approach. With the one-hit permanent death system in Battlefield 6, snipers are arguably more dangerous than ever. So if you can get good enough to counter-snipe an enemy who's quickly taking out your teammates, you can make a big impact in the game. If you're newer to sniping in the Battlefield franchise, there's a few really important mechanics to understand that will help you go a long way. Bullets in Battlefield are based on a projectile system instead of a hit scan system. You might be used to some games where you click on screen and then the bullet instantly hits, but in Battlefield, the bullet has both a time that it takes to get to the target, as well as experiencing bullet drop due to drag and gravity. In Battlefield, the base sniper rifles have stats that impact the bullet speed, and there are also some weapon modifications we can apply to improve this too, as well as reducing how much drag the bullets experience, which increases bullet drop. In effect, this basically means that if you're shooting at targets further away, you need to aim slightly higher than the target to allow for this bullet drop effect so that you can hit your intended target. In Battlefield 6 though, there's a system called weapon zeroing, which makes this process a little bit easier. Now, I'm not a firearms expert, so I might get some of this terminology slightly wrong here, but in general, you can think about it this way. The sniper rifle can be zeroed from 100 meters all the way out to 1000 meters. What this effectively means is that if you zero your rifle to 100 meters and you're standing 100 meters from the target, the bullet will hit the center of your crosshair. It automatically is factoring in that bullet drop for you. Anything less than 100 meters will have such a minimal bullet drop that zeroing to 100 will still hit the center of your crosshair just fine. Now, if you want to aim at something that's like 500 meters away, you can either aim up higher in the sky to account for that bullet drop, or you can simply change your weapon zeroing to increase it up to 500 meters and then allow that bullet to automatically hit the center of your crosshair for a target that's 500 meters away. You can manually change the zeroing in-game with a hotkey, but in Battlefield 6, there's also a mod you can apply to your gun called a rangefinder. A lot of newer snipers won't understand how this works, but it's really powerful and worth learning. When you're aiming at a target, there's an option in the menus where you can choose to automatically zero your weapon to the distance that your crosshair is pointing at. This is called rangefinder zeroing if zoomed. So for example, if I aim at a target that's 423 meters away and I click the button to zero the rangefinder when I'm zoomed, it will automatically set the weapon zeroing to that exact target distance. So if you're sniping at targets that are really far away, this is an incredibly valuable feature to understand and use, and it's much faster than manually dialing in the scope zero distances. There's several different ways that you can set up the keybinds to work with your weapon zeroing. I've tried different setups now, and I'm going to explain the pros and cons of each. So one way is to set up your weapon zeroing on your aim down sight key, which would automatically zero it in whenever you start to zoom. So let's say, for example, on mouse and keyboard, this would be right click. This way, whenever you zoomed in, you're already zeroed at the spot where you started to aim from. Or you can also set it to zero with your fire button, which would be the left click on a mouse and keyboard. I've tried this way for a while, and in some cases it works really great. As long as the target is either at the same elevation or slightly below where you are, the zeroing tends to work pretty well. The problem comes when you're trying to shoot at a target that's above you so that the background is either the sky or some infinite distance away. Your weapon will automatically get zeroed to 1000 meters if you're not perfectly on target, which can throw off your aim by making the bullet go too high. So it can work okay for stationary targets, but if you're aiming at someone who's moving around at all, and you need to anticipate their movement and try to lead the target, then this setup isn't very good. The same thing goes for helicopters. If you're trying to snipe a pilot out of the sky and you need to lead your shot, if you have your zeroing set to either aim down sights or fire, you'll likely miss your shot too high because it's going to be zeroed to 1000 meters. So instead, what I've been doing lately is changing my zeroing key to the shift key or a different button that's on my mouse. I'll just quickly hit this key whenever I need to target an enemy that's further than about 150 meters. I'll just aim at some area that's the same distance away as the enemy I'm trying to snipe, and then I put my crosshair directly on their head and fire. This way I can still properly lead the target and anticipate their movement if needed, and still hit the shots that go the right elevation. I found that this setup works really great, especially for trying to snipe helicopter pilots or really fast moving objects with a variable distance in the background like a Jeep driver. It also works really well for sniping people on top of buildings when there's a sky in the background. Speaking of leading targets, with the projectile bullet system, it's also really important to modify your sniper to have the highest possible bullet speed to make this job easier. The slower your bullets are moving, the more you have to lead your target in order to get a hit, which makes your job as a sniper a lot harder. So it's worth looking at your particular weapon modifications and figuring out all the different ways you can potentially increase this bullet speed. For example, the extended barrel is one of the modifications you can look at. In most past Battlefield games, putting a suppressor on your rifle would drastically reduce your bullet speed, so it was usually not a very good idea. But in Battlefield 6, it actually doesn't have this effect. If you're not familiar already, when you fire a weapon that doesn't have a suppressor or a flash hider, it will show you in the game world with a little red diamond, as well as on the minimap. When you apply a flash hider, you're hidden from the in-game world but still show up on the minimap, and a suppressor will hide you from both the in-game world and the minimap as long as you're at least 15 meters away. With sniping, this makes the suppressor extremely strong because all you have to worry about is being spotted directly, and it makes it much easier to blend into the background. Speaking of that, I think that one of the biggest noob traps that many new snipers fall into is staying scoped in entirely too long. You'll see a lot of players that hold their aim down sight key for many seconds at a time trying to find a new target, but what they may not realize is that they're showing all of the enemy snipers on the opposing team exactly where they're located. When I'm sniping, I'm constantly browsing the horizon for snipers that are showing their glint while I'm in hipfire mode. And then when I spot one, I'll quickly zero in on their location, take a shot, get a kill, and then unscope. This makes it so much easier to get a lot of kills and not many deaths if you get really good at scoping in just long enough to take a shot, then unscoping so that sniper glint goes away. One of the really helpful extra tricks to doing so is to get good at putting the middle of your crosshair exactly where the enemy is before you even scope in. That way you don't have to make much of an adjustment and you can just take the shot. It's also important to keep moving from one location to another when sniping, because the longer you stay in any particular position, the higher likelihood that an enemy has pinged you or at least has an idea of where you might be. So an essential part of positioning as a sniper player is to continuously move from location to location to keep your enemies guessing. And while you're moving, one thing I see a lot of players forget to do is that they can pull out their knife to move a lot faster. So it's usually a good idea to run with your knife out so that you run a little bit faster while you're not behind cover. In Battlefield, there's also a sweet spot mechanic where snipers can deal a one-shot kill if you manage to hit the upper chest area. There's a different sweet spot range for each sniper rifle that has this mechanic, but not all of them do. For example, the new Mini Scout from Season 1 does not have this one-shot mechanic. If your sniper does have this though, it's really important to understand the range so that you can know exactly when you need to aim for a headshot and when you just need to go for an upper chest shot. If you're able to hit that sweet spot, you can land a lot of really quick kills with slightly less precision requiring than hitting all headshots. The regular scope glint is more of a white color and the one-shot kill range is more of a rainbow color. So if you ever see an enemy sniper with this colored scope glint, you need to be really careful and don't show yourself for too long. We spent a lot of time testing the sweet spot range on different snipers and private lobbies, and from what I can tell, here's the current one-shot sweet spot ranges for each sniper. By the way, if you struggle with the default sniper scope on the M2010, the upgraded sniper scopes make sniping way easier. I used to really like the default 6x scope in the beta, but they kind of ruined it in the release version of the game. Favorite ones right now are the 6x SSDS and the 8x LERT. They are both super clean with minimal clutter in the center of the reticle, which makes sniping way easier. Let's talk a little bit about the mentality of an effective sniper player. One of the biggest mistakes I see from newer players trying to snipe is actually their movement. They tend to get up really high on an object, go prone, and stay scoped in for entirely too long. As a decent sniper on the other side of this makes them an incredibly easy target to take out. In my eyes, a really good sniper player will always be moving around and really difficult to hit until the moment where they need to stop to take their shot. It is important to stand perfectly still right as you shoot because there's inaccuracy from moving in Battlefield, and if you're moving while you shoot, you're unlikely to hit your target. Outside of actually taking the shot though, you should be strafing left and right and becoming a much harder target to be counter-sniped. This means that laying prone on top of a mountain or a building is a really easy way to get killed, so I rarely recommend doing this. As a sniper, you always want to be looking for cover that you can use between your shots. The goal should be to strafe out from cover just to take a shot and then strafe back in to be safe. The easiest way to die as a sniper is to put yourself out in the open and allow enemy snipers to shoot at you all the time. Instead, you want to be using that cover to isolate as many 1v1 fights as possible with other snipers and take them out one at a time until there's no other threats and you can more easily shoot at the other infantry players. As a sniper, you can also hold your breath to steady your scope, which as I mentioned earlier is enhanced by your Recon class abilities. Well, there's actually a trick that makes this even easier to utilize. You can bind your hold breath key to the same key or button that you use to aim down sights. This way, if you just wait a moment before shooting, you'll automatically steady your scope, which makes it so much easier to hit those longer range shots. If you're sniping, your biggest danger is actually the players who are in close proximity to you. Your sniper has a fairly low rate of fire, and body shots don't deal enough damage to one-hit kill to a full health enemy, so it's really important to get good at using your sidearm. Frankly, I think the sidearms in Battlefield 6 are generally on the weaker side compared to other Battlefield games, but I have had a lot of success using the M44 revolver. If your aim is good enough, you can get a one-shot headshot kill, and it kills in 2 shots to the body from pretty close. Even at further ranges, it's just a 3-shot kill. It's worth spending some time to get really good with your sidearm because with the slower rechamber speeds of your sniper rifle, you really only have one chance to hit a headshot up close for a kill, and otherwise you're in some pretty big trouble. I've also found that if you can just hit a body shot with the sniper or revolver, a lot of players aren't ready for you to go up and melee them shortly afterwards. I get a surprising amount of knife kills as long as the enemy's already just a little bit injured. I could talk about the mechanics of improving your aim for hours, and it will probably be a specialized video I make in the future. Let me know in the comments if that would be helpful for you. For this video though, I want to at least give you a crash course on a few ideas to try. I'm a really big proponent of external aim training software like Aim Labs or KovaaK, which can help you recreate scenarios that require precise aiming in rapid succession. The reality is, in a game like Battlefield, you're only spending so much of your time aiming, when a lot of your time spent moving around, looking for targets, and repositioning. So just a few minutes a day of dedicated aim training can make a huge difference. I've been doing aim training drills for years, and I found them to be really helpful with my consistency when hitting shots. In particular, aim training on the smaller dot scenarios can be really helpful for sniping to help you dial in your precision for those longer range shots. And dynamic moving dot scenarios are really great for tracking headshots for those closer range combat scenarios. Even if you don't want to get an external aim trainer though, which I totally understand, there's some cool ways that you can practice your aim in the Battlefield 6 Portal mode. A lot of players have already created some pretty neat training maps inside the game with bots. I think it's really worth spending some time practicing flicking from bot to bot to work on your control over your mouse or controller and get really good at these fine corrections so it's second nature when you're out there on the battlefield. You can also simulate practicing on really long range shots by flying over to a bridge, for example, and practicing honing in those headshots from hundreds of meters away. I went through the grind of completing all of the Recon challenges, and the most important one to finish quickly is Recon 1 so you can get access to that C4. You need to spot a lot of enemies in objective areas with the Recon gadgets. By far, the fastest way I found to do this is playing Breakthrough on the Manhattan Bridge map, ideally on the attacking side. Use your Recon drone on the first sector because it's an absolutely massive area, and you'll find tons of enemies sitting on the point. After just a few rounds, you'll probably finish the spotting requirement and then just play some Recon normally to rack up the rest of your score. For Recon 2 to unlock the Spec Ops training path, you need headshots over 150 meters. The best way I've found to do this is to play Operation Firestorm. There's lots of other players out there on the hills who are sniping to work on this challenge, and if you use my weapon zeroing tips and pick a higher zoom optic, you can knock this thing out pretty quickly. And yes, plenty of snipers still do the things I said not to do, like lying prone and hardscoping, so they're pretty easy targets to take out. Recon 3 is actually pretty easy, you just need to trick enemies into shooting your sniper decoy. I did most of this in Breakthrough, just by placing the decoy along the backline and letting those enemy snipers take shots at it, and within a game or two you'll have it done. Recon Specialist 1, we go back to that same Manhattan Bridge tactic we used for Recon 1 and just spot as many enemies as possible. This one's really great to do because it unlocks the tracer dart, which I think is one of the coolest Recon gadgets. Recon Specialist 2 requires laser painting targets that take damage. That may sound like a lot, but if you've got an engineer in your squad who's willing to work with you, just laser paint those vehicles on a bigger map. I usually recommend Escalation for the vehicle density, and then one of those big open maps like Operation Firestorm. You can get this one done pretty quickly. Same thing goes for marking enemies with your tracer dart. Just dip in and out of cover, tag some tanks and IFVs, and you'll finish this one pretty fast too. You can hit those tracer darts from surprisingly far away, so don't be too afraid to take some longer shots. And the final one, Recon Specialist 3, is once again back to Operation Firestorm, but now hitting those shots from 200 meters. Since it has to be done in one match, this is probably the most frustrating one, but if you can get a longer game on Conquest or Breakthrough where people are perched up on those hills or sniper towers, you can probably finish it. The big keys to hit here are to run a high zoom optic, look for those prone snipers and land some headshots. There's also a little bit of a trick where you can reduce your field of view down to 85, which effectively gives you more sniper zoom. So if you're finding even the longest range optics you have aren't quite enough, give this a try. I wouldn't recommend it for your normal gameplay, but if you're trying to go for long range sniper shots, it's a pretty good trick. The C4 part is pretty straightforward. You just need to wait for some tanks to roll by, toss a few C4 charges and click the trigger, and then enjoy that fancy Elite Recon badge. Let me know what other tips you have for new Recon players, and if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. I'm really happy to help and I enjoyed making this one. Up next, check out my video on 55 ways that you may be playing Battlefield 6 wrong. There's a lot more tips to cover in the rest of the game and I think you'll really enjoy it.